Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Process Podcast. Jamie Lau, welcome to the Process Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Why are we on this podcast, Jamie?
Why are we on here? Wow. Share some stories, chat about our lives a bit, connect a little.
Who is Jamie Lau?
Oh, wow. I was going to ask you the same question, but now I'm not going to ask you the same question. I'm a personal trainer. I think that's the easiest way. I used to try and say a lot of words, but that's as simple as it gets. I'm a dad of two, and I currently work in London, here in Hong Kong. I haven't been here for a while, so it's been really nice to just hang out, meet the new crew here. Lots of things have changed, but lots of things have also stayed the same.
So I think some context is probably needed there.
Yeah.
You worked for myself,
Well,
part of the coastal team.
Yeah. Well,
do you want to introduce that? You go.
Well, in 2012, I wanted to work in pro rugby, and I was going to ask you. Do you remember when you first met?
Yeah, it was in the. I think it was in the gym at South China.
Wow. Yeah, you do remember.
Yeah,
okay, good.
It was South China. It was a Hong Kong rugby team session. So we were doing our weight training. I think you were like interning as a coach, or were you shadowing as a coach?
Correct.
And you were in there, and I actually remember exactly where it was. It was by the dumbbell rack.
Wow.
And you had just come over, and I can't even remember how our conversation started, but then it got to the point where I was saying, I run a business here, doing personal training and group coaching. We were about to open a gym. I think that's where we were, right? We were about to open our first gym. Yeah. How's that for
That was actually,
memory?
we've actually not prepped any of this, and I haven't prepped edit for any of this, so I'm actually pretty impressed. That's exactly how it went. And I was told to be like, hey, this guy, he seems really smart from other people. He runs his own private gym, maybe you want to chat to him. And I literally remember just beelining over and being like, hey, I think you gave me either just your number or your email or maybe even a card at the time. And at the time I was 22. I really had no idea where this journey was going to go. But I remember emailing you after. Do you remember this email? It was. I just asked what I needed to potentially, if I were to work together, what would that be? Do you remember what you said?
I can't remember.
No, it was just that I saw that you were doing some CrossFit at the time, and you said, well, you've got these qualifications, they look great. I did sports science degree, but you were like, if you could do your CrossFit level 1, that would be good. So that really sparked, and I, just back then being kind of young, I just signed up to a CrossFit level 1.
I remember you doing that, yeah.
Yeah, and never done CrossFit before, never heard of it before. I just did it because you said it. And back then they made you do Fran in the first day and could only do strict pull-ups. Didn't obviously bring the bar down. I thought I can push press this way, I can squat this way, no problem. And my gosh, I was sore for a whole week, and it took me maybe 9 minutes to finish the workout doing strict pull-ups. My level 1 seminar, I think I literally just talked about this on one of my podcasts just gone, but I had just had a shoulder operation, and so I was literally just out of a sling. And I'd emailed them before being like, I just had a shoulder reconstruction, like my 10th one. Can we just take it easy? Is that okay if I still take part in the level 1? But yeah, no worries. You'll be completely fine. And they came to Fran, and and I was like, so, I'm happy I can just judge or watch. They're like, no, you're doing Fran. You have to. It was like part of it.
What? How am I going to do Fran? So I think I had dumbbell thrusters at like 25 kg, single arm, and single arm ring rows. Like, geez, the amount of information I created on my body in that session. Anyway,
to be fair, that's much more like CrossFit now. Single arm dumbbell thruster.
It is, yeah.
And heavy.
I felt incredibly imbalanced after that session, obviously, but.
And
so you did your level 1.
Correct. And then I came back, worked with the rugby team, and back then you had just stopped like playing, I want to say, or you were like in and out. Because I remember seeing your name on that little tick sheet I had to sign, and Ant used to come in and be like, hey mate, could you just tick me off and then I can leave? And I'm like, nah, I can't do it.
Yeah, that's right.
So he'd come in and do his 5x5 bench presses, and then pretend to do anything else, and then go and train at the gym the old gym that was here.
Yeah, I mean, well, that would have been 2013.
Yeah.
That's about 2013, wasn't it? So that's when we opened the gym. And when we opened the gym, I think I had already just finished playing for Hong Kong. I had made that decision at the end of the season. This was going to be my final year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we just crossed over.
Correct. And then I decided this wasn't for me. Pro sport or pro rugby in Hong Kong definitely wasn't for me, and I actually quit my job before I even had anything lined up. And then I came in, and it's something that I kind of think about a lot because I hear people who own gyms and say is that they like to see how people work out. And I remember before anything happened or before any conversation happened of whether I was going to work, it was let's kind of work out together. And I remember just seeing that environment, and it was very cool at the time, and it was very open, but it was also very much like, this is how we do things here. And I learned a lot and very quickly from that, which is kind of the same as it is now.
Which is kind of crazy when I hear about that from you, because we had literally had a gym for probably less than a year.
Yep.
And so to feel like you walked in and you could feel the vibe already. What was that vibe, if you would explain it?
It's just that it's everyone looking at you in the eye, and everyone being like who you're here to see, like before. Because back then it was less, I guess, like professionalizing the experience. But it's just that if you look like you don't know what you're doing, someone will come over and be like, "You're right. What's happening? Do you know what you're doing?" And then when people are like grabbing weights or the workout starting, it's like, "Do you need this? Do you need that?" And that kind of community was always there for me. But then it also came with like some explanation, as opposed to just like follow, like it's not like a boot camp, right? Where it's just like, come down, follow this, follow that. And as much as I wanted to hang with the big boys at the time, I definitely wasn't ready to do that. And there was probably more so now than back then, some kind of like, hey, maybe you should do this. Maybe this is where you want to sit on this thing. Maybe you want to choose this way, which obviously is much more powerful now, looking at just how the programming itself has changed over those years. And even when I was obviously here as well.
It's cool to hear.
Yeah, it's funny to think about it on the other side, isn't it? Because you never think about the experience. At the time, your head's down, and you're just doing what you need to do for your day to day.
I think back then, you know, what that team was in the early days was essentially, that was myself, Ant, Bratsy, Fulton, behind front desk, Babsy. And so as a collective, we'd been together for kind of 3 to 4 years already, all like, you know, Hong Kong kids, all knew each other basically from the start of secondary school all the way to the end.
Same school, right? Everyone?
Brats and Babs at a different school, myself and Fulton at the same, but a very close-knit group. Because even when we were freelance coaches before we actually moved into our first gym, we would spend all day, every day together. Like lunch was together every day, like without fail, at least 5 to 6 days a week. We'd be in the same personal training studios, we'd be doing the same group classes, attending each other's group classes, we'd do things like Smack. So I think, there was this unspoken culture that had already been created amongst us. And I think whilst I have probably evolved and changed over the years, the core of that culture has always been there. It's nice to hear it. It's cool to hear it.
Yeah, and it was fun to be part of it, but also be different. I remember, you know, we had loads of early conversations because I was just, you guys have gotten such a groove and such a routine of how things happen. And even like Smack, the first time I had to run Smack, it's just like, you just pull these kettlebells out of here and you just drag them here and you chain them up here and everyone does this. And I was like, wow, this was a fast learning curve. And at the time I was pretty scared, but it meant that I had to just dive myself in and kind of go for it and let my skills kind of go there. And actually, I didn't write it down, but do you remember you gave me a client really early on that you geared up to be like, this is going to work really well, but was an absolute test?
Who was it?
Your dad.
Oh, yes. Like, what a horrendous first client to have.
It wasn't first, but it was quite up there.
Yeah.
But that was cool because it just gave me some faith and trust, but at the same time, let me learn a few lessons as well.
Well, I don't know if you know, but my dad is back in the gym now.
Really?
Doing some kind of work. And so I reckon you should take some credit for that. You were the first dose of like resistance training in a gym. And he's been on some journey as well himself. Like like at the time, the gym stuff, he's a very stubborn Hong Kong expat.
Oh, and really?
Stubborn in every way you could possibly think of. The most fixed-minded individual you could probably think of. I love you, Dad, if you're listening. But, he came into the gym thinking that it was something he knew he needed to do, but wasn't open-minded enough to really give it a go.
Yep.
And he's always been a sports guy, to be honest, like team sports, like play, activity, outdoors. That's kind of his thing. But, over the years, as his health deteriorated, he basically... he used to play squash every week, twice a week. His knee started to hurt, stopped playing squash. Then he would run. When his knee started to hurt even more, he stopped running. So basically had this reductionist approach of just removing activities as soon as pain started to exist.
Yep.
Till he got to a point where the only sport he could play was golf. And then basically at that point in time, this was just before COVID hit in 2019, he couldn't play golf anymore, couldn't walk around 18 holes. And he was literally like, I can't do anything. His knees had both locked up to the point where he couldn't bend them past 10 degrees, basically. He couldn't walk for more than 10 minutes, like genuinely more than 10 minutes continuously, I'd say, without aggressive pain. Like free falling down to the toilet and getting like a mess. And he had basically essentially booked himself in for a double knee replacement in mid 2019, and basically said, like, I've got no other option, I have to do this. And then COVID hit. Doctors couldn't do surgeries, so he had no option. He was stuck at home, couldn't travel, so he had no option. So he cut out booze for a little bit, so that's the kind of inflammation part, that massive subsided, pain reduced straight away, and he just needed to get out of the house. So we started walking. It was 10 minutes, then it was 20 minutes, then it was 30, then it was an hour, then it was 2.
Amazing.
And like, I talk about how amazing the human body is. He literally went from not being able to walk 10 minutes, couldn't bend his knees more than 10 degrees without them giving out, like literally, like he would almost crumble to the floor. Couldn't pull an empty sled backwards, like couldn't go up and down a set of stairs without immense pain, to like now running if you wanted to, 4 hours, squatting full depth with cycler squats, like incredible, like minimal pain. So yeah, massive sidetrack, but that's his story.
No, but I think that, and doctors saying that you need that. I always think we've both had knee surgeries, you've had multiple surgeries. When doctors are like, this is your last option, I always say to people to be like, can we just keep exploring without first? We can always operate later, but like, what does that look like, being able to do that? And actually looking at your other systems as opposed to blaming the physical side.
Yes.
It's definitely a different story. All right, I want to go back a bit and talk about rugby.
That's good.
It's something that you don't talk about a lot, I feel. Why do you think you don't talk about it that much? Our specifics, but...
I think I don't talk about rugby because when I transitioned into coaching, I held on to my rugby identity, and I use that as kind of a springboard into coaching. So basically, like, come train with Ed Haynes, the Hong Kong rugby player, was basically like what it said on my website. And in the first year or so, I had people coming to me who wanted to train with me because I was a Hong Kong rugby player.
Yep.
And I think I was going through a transitional phase there of like removing myself, of realizing that rugby was no longer my identity, and having so much love and passion for this business and for coaching people that I wanted that to be me now. And I think a whole nother conversation is like, should your job really be so it's closely attached to your identity? Maybe it shouldn't, but where I was at that point in time was that I wanted to remove the rugby, and I wanted people to appreciate me for the skill set I had in coaching. So I think that was one. Was that like I just didn't want to be the rugby guy anymore. And I think I have I think about my rugby times a lot, actually.
What do you think about?
I never committed to rugby the way I wish I did.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's sometimes the question is like, what is one thing in your past that you wish you could do differently? And one of the things I always think about is I wish I took my opportunities in sport more. I was very much like big fish in a small pond, never really had to work for anything, had it all given to me. And like, as the opportunities arose as I got older, I had just stopped developing, I think, as a player. Obviously, like, injuries had like caused a lot of like psychological
reluctance.
Yeah, reluctance, I'd say. Like, in a contact sport like rugby, you can't have that. And I think as every operation, I also, I think back to every time I'd have a major injury and it would be back in the doctor's office saying like, you need to have another operation. It was never a question. The question was, do you want to get back to playing rugby again? And it was always like, yes, I definitely do. But I think if I actually dig into why did I want to get back to playing rugby, I think there was lots of things that fed into that. I think one was feeling a pressure, the fact that my brother was up and coming and he was doing really well, and I wanted to stay ahead of him as like the older brother, the better brother, which is so ridiculous when I say it now, but I think that was it. I had a pressure from him, also like receiving accolades and making it into the same team as myself and actually doing really, really well. I think that was it. I think another thing was as well like the identity that I created for myself. Like, my reputation was the rugby guy, the Hong Kong kid who now transitioned to rugby, and it was like, what would life be if I wasn't that person anymore? And that actually scared me. So I actually held on to that label for so long, purely, I think, out of fear of what the rest of the world would think of me if I wasn't that person.
Yep. And there's something that probably not many people know about you. You went to the Asian Games, and it's the second biggest multi-sport competition over the Olympics. How was that experience?
That was amazing. I mean, that was like, we won silver medal. That's like, we were the first Hong Kong team sport team sport to ever win a medal, I believe. And Hong Kong was moved into the government funding for the very first time. We were seen as professional sport. We'd finally proven it. But where I was at as a player at that time, I had already fallen out of love with rugby.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the interesting thing is, I had like these years of trauma with injury throughout university, came out of uni, and then, had my first 6 months of playing like Premiership rugby in Hong Kong, and I was like on fire. And I had finally felt like this was the moment, like those years of like missing out on so much university rugby because of injuries. But I trained the whole way through uni, and I trained all the time, even though I was injured, and came back here and was like really making a splash. Was making a splash in the Premiership, was making a splash with the Hong Kong team in the Sevens circuit, was playing really, really well. Confidence was like by far the highest it had been in 4 or 5 years. And that's when I tore my ACL. And I tore my ACL in a competition in Borneo, like in the semi-finals, and like was gutted. That was the best form I'd ever been in. And there was already conversations like East Asian Games come around the corner. Like I'd already booked my place in that team after the first match. Like Rowan Varty, our centre, he was the golden boy of Hong Kong rugby.
Yep.
He like got a dead leg in one of the warm-up games against India. And so they were like, right, Ed, you're going to be starting centre. And I'd played fly half the whole time. So I just kind of got this opportunity.
Who was at 10? Keith?
Keith.
Yep.
Yeah. We had an awesome team. It was like early days of it. And I was like, after that first game, they were like, okay, Ed's our guy for Asian Games, East Asian Games. Well, he's going to be starting. Like even Vart was like,
worried.
Shit. Yeah. And then tearing my ACL, I was like, that was the first time I probably had an injury where I was like, I 100% want to come back now. Like I know I can do it. I had the confidence to know that I could compete at the highest level. So I took my rehab really seriously. I basically stopped drinking for 6 months. Like wasn't really partying, doing any of the stuff that I would do.
Yeah, this is when you had the TRX like in, and you were doing like
I was in everything
in the bed, like doing.
Yeah.
I remember
absolutely.
that.
I attached bands at the end of my bed and like start my shoulder rehab straight away. Super committed to getting back. And then at the 6 month mark, that's where I had my Staph aureus infection, and like I've reflected on that a lot, and it's 100% like stress related. Like I basically filled the void, the rugby that wasn't happening, I filled with work, and I basically like just flogged myself 7 days a week coaching, 12-hour days, waking up at 4 a.m, going to bed at 11 p.m, being out all day. I'd literally leave house with literally like a camping bag, and I'd be on crutches. I hadn't respected the fact that your body needs to heal and recover. I went straight into rehab. Like I was basically trying to squat like a week after getting an ACL reconstruction. I just did everything. I just pushed the limits. And then, basically wake up one day and I had this lump on my knee, which ended up over 4 or 5 days developing into like a fucking grapefruit. And then next minute I'm in an operating theatre at 1 o'clock in the morning in some hospital in the middle of new territories I've never heard of, because they're like, we need to cut you open now. And I'm like lying on this bed and I'm like, what has happened? Like a day ago, I was like doing my first 100-meter sprints, pain-free, zigzagging, changing directions. And I'm looking at this doctor who's honestly about 30 years old. He's being told, you got a Hong Kong rugby player, you need to cut his knee open and save his knee because he might have like MRSA. And this guy is like shitting himself. Like he's genuinely shitting himself. I'm like so messed up at this point, like fever through the roof, knees like throbbing. I'm just like, cut me open and get this shit out of me, basically. Yep. And then, I've been trying to I'd call Diaries to head coach, and I'm like, something's happened to my knee. Like I'm a mess. They've stuck this needle into my knee and they pulled out all this fluid. They think it's really bad. They've got to cut me open now. And he's like, shit, like just get it done. We'll sort it out. Don't worry. I'd called my surgeon, CC Kong. I think, do you have a CC Kong
as
well?
CC as well.
So I called CC Kong, trying to call this guy, couldn't get through to him. Left messages with receptionist. They're like, he's in surgery right now. He can't do anything. So I'm like, okay, well, this guy is my best bet. And I'm just like in this dingy little room, like about to get anesthesia put in my arm, just hope that my knee's going to be okay. And he like literally, as I'm about to get wheeled into like the operation theater, my dad's like, your phone's ringing, CC Kong's calling you. So I'm like on the bed, I pick up the phone, I'm like, hello. And he's like, what's up? I'm like, this is it. This is what I'm about to go into the operating theater now. And he's like, stop. He's like, I need you to come to Matilda Hospital right now. I'll cut you open like in the next hour. So I'm like, okay, shit. I've actually never told the story, so it's quite funny.
Yeah, I've heard bits of this, but I've not heard all of it.
Yeah, so I went with my dad, because my dad had driven me, he was quite worried about me because like I was really a mess. Like, and I was a mess for 5 days. I just ignored it. I would literally like
Sweating.
I would sweat like 5 liters at night, and like wake up in the morning and I'd look like a zombie and like set out at 4 a.m. to go coach people. And it got to one point when I was coaching on a Saturday where I literally couldn't put weight on my leg and my knee had quadrupled in size. So only then my dad drives me to Matilda Hospital, so back onto Hong Kong Island, and I'm there. It's like 2 a.m. in the morning now. CC Kong, this guy like legend, rocks up and he's like, what the, because obviously he's operated my knee. So he's thinking, what did I do? But this is 6 months post-op. That never happens. And so he's like, right, we'll cut you open. So he ended up doing the operation on me, and I ended up staying in hospital for almost 3 weeks. I'm in like an isolation unit. I've got the tropical bacteria or something team working on me, trying to test what the hell's happened, because they're like, I have no open lesions, no cuts. How the hell did this thing happen? And like they literally couldn't. They've talked about it, they still talk about my case when they do doctor summits now, talking about knees, and they talk about this rugby player who like 6 months post ACL got a Staph aureus infection, had to come up with no open lesions, and yeah, so I ended up being in an isolation unit for 3 weeks, pumped full of everything, doing all this research, trying to find out what it was. Found out eventually it was Staph aureus. But yeah, that was really, after that, my knee was just never, ever even close to being the same. It was like, it looked different. There was like bony protrusions popping out of my knee, osteophytes, calcification, couldn't straighten my leg, was like limping for like 3 months. So I was like, something's just not right. Didn't really get the help. I didn't get any expert help in terms of rehabilitation, like what I should be doing. In hindsight, like I've now learned that, a Staph aureus infection rehabilitation process needs to look completely different from an ACL rehab. And I just got given my old ACL program, like just redo this again. So I'm like, okay, did that.
Well, what about the mental side of that?
Well, the mental side of it was that, like, as I started to run, I remember I remember being in the operation theater, and I had 3 surgeons operate on me. Like, they basically called on all the big dogs in Hong Kong to try and sort this knee out. I had CC Kong, I had Brockwell, I had another guy, and I was sat on my bed at the end of it, knowing that, a day ago, I was sprinting and was about to like make my full return to Hong Kong rugby training, and I was so excited. To now, I'm like, my knee is like a massacre. Like, genuinely, like, it's been split open. There's blood everywhere. There's pipes coming in and out of it. And I'm like, so what happened? Like, what happens now? And I remember one of the surgeons just says, I think your knee is going to be about 3 months behind now. So where you got another 3 months to do. And as he walked out, I started crying. Like, I haven't told anyone this, but I sat in my bed and I started crying, thinking like, I can't believe I've done all of this and I'm gotten 3 months back. If I'd actually known that my knee would never even bounce back to like 60% of what it was, like, that's the reality of it. But at the time I was like bawling my eyes out, thinking I'm 3 months behind now. I'm supposed to be playing the East Asian Games. That's been like this dream that I want to play Asian Games. So, the mental side, that was a real challenge. But, I just kind of like got back to work, but the knee was just never the same. Like, I mean, like, not even close to being what it was 3 days ago. And it never ever got close to being that point. I just couldn't bend, couldn't do loads of things with it. But there was just no one there to tell me what was happening. So I was saying things like, this lump on my knee, which is, I now know is bone, which is the calcification had grown to protect the knee in certain areas. I was like, this wasn't there before. And people were like, oh, no, I think it's just like a tight muscle. And I'm like, all right, okay, maybe it's tight. Like, genuinely years went by before I did my own research to realize actually what it was. But, the Hong Kong team, fast forward. I remember being on a lad's holiday and thinking like, okay, this is my last little holiday. We're probably like 3 months post, this next set of operations. I'm still kind of limping. Like, I'm not really able to do that much. And I'm like, I know that I'm about to get back from holiday. I've got 1 week off and then preseason starts the Hong Kong team. And I've already been told like, I'm back in the mixer, going to start prepping for the Asian Games. And so I'm like, shit, I haven't even run. Like, I haven't even jogged. And I remember like, we were just going on this little walk to the summit on PP Island of one of our more sober days. And I'm like, I should probably start like trying to jog a little bit. So I start like trying to run up this mountain, and my knee literally, it's not working. I could hardly break into a 50% run without like pain and just feeling like my gait is completely off. Like, I can't lift my leg up. I can't pull it back. something's just, and I remember Keith was with me. He watched me and he's like, "Oh, that doesn't look good."
Yeah.
I'm like, "It doesn't feel good." Holy shit. And I'm thinking like in a week's time, I'm supposed to be back with the national team prepping for the Asian Games. So I'm like, all right, fuck it, just go with the flow. Let's see what happens. I get into Hong Kong training, like my leg is like half the size of it was, even though I've been doing all this rehab, trying to do everything. And I start, playing some live simulation games. And I'm literally trying to run, and I actually can't run. Like I'm trying to sprint, and I'm like stuck at like 75% of my previous like best pace. So like I'm basically jogging, and I'm limping, and like the coaches on the side are like, what is he doing? Like, why is he not running? And I'm like, I'm literally trying to run. I've followed all your rehab. No one's ever looked at me. Like, you just expected me to kind of do my rehab, follow my ACL program, and be back here sprinting like I was 3 months ago. But like, my leg had just taken on like this whole new life. Anyway, they took me on the next tour. The next tour was to Kuala Lumpur. I think it was Jonah Jones, which was like we used to do every. I think you did Jonah Jones once, yeah.
That was my first.
Yeah. So we went to Jonah Jones and
good tournament.
Yeah, and like I remember in the warm up game, I think we were playing against Sri Lanka. I'm like, my knee's a mess that day. I could hardly jog. There's so much pain. And I'm thinking just like
more ice.
I'm just like they're just more Smarties.
Yeah.
Take more ibuprofen, you'll be fine. I was literally munching on these things, thinking like, please just get me right for tomorrow. But something's just not right. Anyway, I played the tournament. I played off the bench basically, and that was quite hard because I really didn't like at that point in my career. I had never really come off the bench, and that was like a whole new thing. Like you're no longer the starter, you're the sub now. And I was coming on and just playing the last few minutes. I actually played decently well, but it was literally like I couldn't break it into more than a jog. The knee improved a little bit. Anyway, I ended up making selection for Asian Games. It was pretty touch and go between me and another guy. I honestly don't think I deserved to be in that team. I hadn't regained my full confidence. I felt like I was a shadow of my former self. Coastal fitness was already booming, and I was loving that. And yeah, like
what was this? 2012?
This was 2000. I think this is 2010, actually 2010 with the Asian Games.
Okay.
So make Asian Games, and obviously like an amazing experience. Like literally wouldn't change it for the world. But like honestly, like those memories for me are such a blur, because I think there's lots of things. I think I was living a life where I wasn't being my authentic self. I was trying to hold on to this someone else that I was trying to be. I didn't really know deep down who I wanted to be. I had so much conflicting thoughts between being a coach, being a business owner, being a rugby player, trying to show that I wanted to play rugby, but deep down inside knowing that I didn't really want to be there. And that's hard. That's a hard slog when you're a pro player and you've got training every day, twice a day on top of your work, and you're not actually enjoying any of it. So yeah, I honestly think I created so much more stress internally just by putting myself through that, really, rather than just having the honest conversation. I actually tried to, after the Asian Games that year, I tried to actually quit. And I remember sitting down with the head coach saying like, I think I'm done. Like,
yep.
I would love to do this, but my body's just like not letting me. And I've got this coastal fist, and I actually got talked into.
I think I do remember this.
He was a really good talker. Yeah, he convinced me to play one more season. I went in genuinely with such a clear game plan, just to be like, okay, like
tick the boxes.
Say this, just be honest. Like, don't hold anything back. And then by the end of it, I'd signed on for another year, and I was like, for fuck's sake, why have I done that? So anyway, that one more year, that was the end of it.
Did you know at the time that was going to be it at the Asian Games? Like, I sometimes think, because we've worked with a bunch of athletes, and I just try and say now, like, living in the moment, all that, it all sounds good, but this could be it. Like, this could be the highest or the best that you've ever done, but you won't know it, because everyone wants. Any athlete's like, I can do better. Any athlete's like, I can do this again. And did you know at the time that was going to be it? This was the highest level you're potentially going to play at the biggest venue, at the biggest occasion. Get to a gold medal match. What did you feel? Were you even there?
I honestly think I wasn't really there.
Yeah. You never talk about, honestly, like, it's a massive moment, and I've seen it happen, and it was Japan, and it's this huge thing, and people talk about it, because I was working for the Hong Kong Rugby, and I want to know about the history and all of that stuff, and it's a big part of that. But
I just, like, when I look back on those days, like, I just didn't. I think also none of us really did. Like, we didn't take professional rugby. We didn't treat it the way professional rugby should have, and that's why I feel so passionate when I work with high level athletes now. I'm like, take this opportunity. Like, you don't have many years in this, and like, if this really means a lot to you, like, you've got to put everything into this. When I think back to it, like, again, like that as a kid, the big fish in a small pond, like, that just continued. I felt like I hadn't really earned my place to be back in that Asian Games squad, so I was kind of just like, oh, I'm here, I've kind of made it, And it was the old Hong Kong team mentality. Kind of as I got into the team, the Hong Kong team mentality was, if you make it to the sevens, you get selected in the sevens team. It doesn't matter how we play. You just got to put it on get to put on your CV. You played in Hong Kong sevens. You tick that box. And really, what it was all about was get kicked out on day 2, go party in the South Stand, which is terrible. And when the management came in my years of playing, they really came in and said, like, we're going to change this. This is not how it should be. Like, if you're going to be professional rugby players, like, we're going to compete. So they really kind of changed the mindset of Hong Kong rugby. And I really think those years were like, is what has put Hong Kong rugby to where it is now, and to see it, it can continue to improve, and sevens team is actually like quite competitive right now. And I do think those were the formative years that kind of led to all that happening. But I just wish I had taken it more seriously. Yeah. And just put more time, put more energy, had been more present. I was still so much, as I was 25 years old then, I was still more concerned with impressing other people than actually chasing my own dreams. I was more concerned about what others thought rather than being present in the moment. There was one time, I think before one of our games, I can't remember who we were playing, but I literally was so unpresent at the Asian Games, I walked out the changing rooms without my rugby shorts on. I'm literally not joking. My mates take the piss out of me all the time. That we had literally got kitted up, had our team talk, and I walked out with my spandex on. And one of my teammates like, mate, where are your shorts? And I was like, oh my God.
You're lucky you weren't starting, I assume.
No, I'd left them hanging. I wasn't starting. I think that might have been against Mongolia. I think I actually was starting that game. So I ran back in and put my shorts on. I think back to it now, I'm like, oh my, that just shows
how disconnected
I was in that moment. I don't even know, couldn't even tell you what I was thinking about. I definitely know that I had definitely suffered on the biggest stage, like definitely performance anxiety when it came to rugby. Like I would really be so concerned about not screwing up or not messing up. And I think that's honestly what kickstarted my learning, or like my journey with learning more about sports psychology. Because I realized that I had issues that I hadn't really ever tried to understand, ever dealt with. I had been told to speak to sports psychologists because we had one with the Hong Kong team, but I went to the meeting, but I wasn't at the right place in my journey to know what I could potentially get out of that conversation. And it's just all superficial bullshit. I wasn't really actually being honest. I wasn't a place to be honest with anyone or about anything.
Yeah. But to make it maybe more about CrossFit and this market, actually seeing like a Tia Claire Toomey be able to enjoy the moment, as much as it's different because she's winning and she's going to win. That moment there is so rare in sport. It's not until people lift the cup that they can actually let go. To be able to actually be in the sport at this time, to actually be able to smile and actually be able to soak stuff in, is a powerful, powerful moment. And I don't think very few people can do it. You don't see it very often.
Yes, bring it back to CrossFit now. I look at interviews with, these teenagers now who are coming onto the stage. You've got Mal O'Brien.
Yeah, Haley Adams,
but not even so much Haley Adams. I think like Emma Carey, Emma Lawson. You hear these guys talk and it's literally like they're 40 and they've been competing for 20 years. It's that emotional maturity that these people have. And it's like, you look at the talent and the skill set and the physical capacity of CrossFit Games competitors, you put it on paper and like everyone's pretty much the same. There's marginal differences that separate the first place from 50th place at CrossFit Games. But it's honestly, emotional maturity, I think, is so massive. And you hear Emma Carey talk when she's like, this is just what I want to do. This is my destiny. Yeah. Like, my coach says I need to take it easy. Like, I fully believe in that because I'm here for the long run. You're just hearing things that it takes most people 10, 15 years of high level competition to realize. When people reach that maturity as an athlete at like 30, these girls have it at 18. And I think, that is, sometimes I think it can be taught. I think great mentors play a really good role there, obviously parenting, but I think there's something in like these people that it's just this natural combination of like having a really, really strong, powerful why, having emotional maturity, and then of course having all the physical capacities that they need for whatever sport they compete in.
But that, I found, because we both transitioned pretty much at the same time from rugby. I gave up like a year after, or pretty much starting Coastal. And to be honest, it was the same story. You said it to me because you were pretty negative for obvious reasons, but you were like, you'll give it up because this will be more important to you. And it was, to be fair. I remember you saying, because I was trying to train in Hong Kong and also do all of our Olympic lifting progressions and also get better at gymnastics and then also do our cardio work. And I was having to do what basically Ant was having to do, nowhere near the same level, but like hiding in rugby training so I didn't get so fatigued doing fatigue training so I could then come in the next day. And then I'd play a game on Saturday and I'd be so sore on Monday and I'd have to miss Monday session. I'd be playing catch up. The same thing happened over and over, right? But how does it feel? I found it both amazing but also really difficult in my mind to be like, there's no real excuses in CrossFit, especially at like a semi-amateur or like medium level, because most of the time you know the workouts, most of the time you can practice them, and most of the time you've done variations of them, if not done them multiple times. And it is about the execution of what that feels like. How do you think that journey has been for you competing, let's say early on versus maybe competing now?
Yeah, it's like I think about rugby and there's so much uncontrollable, and like pretty much the whole game from when you kick off is uncontrollable.
And a referee too. That's
you're reacting to everything that's happening around you. What the opponent does, where the ball goes. It's the same as every other sport I play. CrossFit, I had played CrossFit was the very first time I was like, this is totally in your control. Actually doesn't matter. Okay, the judge gives you a no rep, but if you hit the rep, you won't get a no rep. So there was definitely a lot of shifts. And it was also the very first time I'd ever done an individual sport. I had always had like teammates to lean on. Like that had always been my environment. And being like out there by myself on the floor. And actually the moment, you'll remember this well because you fucking loved it. You're going to know what I'm going to say, is the downtown throwdown. So we had this competition.
I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, we had this competition and we were hosting it. And I also learned a lot about like, Ed, you can't run a comp and compete at the same time.
And you're my boss.
Yeah.
There was a lot
so
there.
much.
We've never actually spoken about this that deeply. Let's go on.
Yeah, so we had this was a qualifying comp to the Asia Champs finals. And I had a really bad first workout. Like just went way too hot.
Because you were in the first heat, last heat, as in with the top dogs.
That's right. Yeah, and I completely butchered. I think it was a thruster, a 52 kg thruster, pull up, chest to bar muscle up. Yeah, like a Fran-ish type workout. Yeah, and then there was this workout that, and this is my second high level comp. I think I'd done the minute of throwdown, which me and Ant went competed. I think I took third in that, and Ant won it. And then this was my second ever comp, and this was like quite big, just like all the big dogs in Asia. And there was a workout, and of course you remember what it was. It was start on a row. There was a row buy-in, then there was burpee box jumps. I believe it was on 30-inch burpee box jumps, and it was deadlifts and unbroken handstand walks. In 2014, like unbroken handstand walks was quite a big deal. Yeah, like people weren't that good at it, but they were 10 meter unbroken handstand walks. If you fail, you went back. And I remember in this heat, was destroying it. Like I was so far ahead.
You were over a round ahead.
Yeah.
It was 5 rounds.
It was 5 rounds. That's it. And I basically got to my last handstand walk and suddenly like my mindset shifted completely. Rather than just being like, just flow, just go, hand over hand, hold your position. It suddenly became about finishing, which is, we're going to go into trust the process in a minute. But anyway, suddenly it became all about the outcome and not the process. And I walked that final 10 meters and I got to 9 meters and I fell. I was looking for the line, which I had never done in any of the rounds. I fell. Okay, no worries. Like I've been crushing these handstand walks. This will be no problem. Walked back, shook it out, kicked up again, got literally 9 meters again and fell. I'm still in the lead. Like that's how big my lead was. And I'm like, okay, take a little bit more rest. Go again, kick up. I get about 6 meters now because obviously now my shoulders are fried. And then I see you coming. I'm like, shit. Yeah. Can't have
a whole round. I can hear. And on the mic too, which was such a big deal. You've got your brother.
I had completely blocked him out.
I
couldn't hear anything.
I could hear him. He was literally being like, this is employee versus boss. This is, and I'm like, there was a lot going on in my head. But
I was just like, oh my God, like, wow, this is what it feels like to completely explode and blow up in a workout. So I walk back to the line. I'm like, I see you coming. And so what I should have really done is just completely ignored you, waited probably a minute and just finished off that last handstand walk. Obviously, can't have Jamie beat me in this workout. So I turn around and I kick up straight away. This time I literally get like 5 meters. So I've now done almost an extra genuinely like 70 meters of handstand walk and not got credited. Obviously you fly past me. Next person flies past me. The whole heat's flying past us. I'm just failing handstand walks. And I basically didn't even finish that workout. And yeah, I think I was like 7 minutes under the time cap and I didn't finish it. I had 1 more meter to go.
Yeah.
So like that hit me.
That was the first time I'd ever been in a workout.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah, that hit me really
showed
hard.
multiple things for me. Like, that you blew up massively, but for me, actually, it helped massively with my confidence, which shouldn't have been attached to you, but it helped me a lot just in general to be like, actually, between the years, like you can do this. And I mean, as an athlete, you're much more balanced than I am, and it proved that when we were training. But when it comes down to it in a competition, it's just one workout and it could be one movement, and it comes into execution like that, and then it becomes a really big headspace game.
And you know, at that point in the competition, I still remember it well. I was kind of like, well, because this competition was a qualifying comp for the finals, and by this point I was just like, all right, I'm out. You know, like we had to finish top 5, right?
Yeah. To
guarantee your spot. You could get a wild card spot, which I ended up getting, but I was like, no, I'm done. So I basically said, right now it's just about having fun.
Yeah.
And then like the next event, I like PR'd my lifts, had a really good last event, and I'm like, that's what it feels like to compete. Like when you're actually just having fun and the outcome doesn't really matter. But I actually ended up after that, I hired a sports psychologist. I think I'm pretty sure I shared it with the team. I spoke to my coach at the time and I said, this is what happened. And he said for the first time, he's like, it sounds like you had performance anxiety. You blew up, like you prevented yourself from doing better. And like, holy shit, in that moment, floods of rugby coming back to me. All these moments where I've been playing a high profile game as a kid. I still remember under 12's New Year's Day playing for Hong Kong. Big crowd at football club, and I'm like, all I'm telling myself in my head off the first scrum is don't drop the ball. What happened? Drop the ball. And I remember that literally still haunts me to this day, because I remember the language I was telling myself in my head, and then obviously then it happened. And so when my coach says it sounds like you actually got some performance issues, would you be interested in speaking to a sports psychologist? I know someone here. And I said, firstly, I was like, wow, no one's ever told me I have like performance issues. But then in that moment I was like, yes, I do. Like there's so many times in high profile games in rugby and football where I feel like I underperformed because I made this event so much more than what it was. And so I worked with this guy and it was really, really helpful. Like I learned a lot. I learned about visualization. I learned about positive self-talk. You know, he had me journal for the first time. And you know, this is way before anyone was talking about journaling.
Yep.
And then I ended up going and we competed. Luckily got a wild card to the finals and had like probably one of the best competitions I've ever had.
Yeah, and weirdly I had my worst. We literally flip-flopped.
Yeah, I remember. I think I was seeded 23rd and I was like top 3 all weekend.
Yeah.
And I just dropped down out of the podium in the very last workout. So yeah, interesting. But I think, a lot of things that were very different in CrossFit moving from rugby.
So that melting pot at the start, when people ask me about my experiences here, I actually think learning is the thing that I had the most. So back then we all had, and it was from you, to be honest, and Ant, we all had different coaches. We all would share in our programming and we would all go through that. And I think this whole specialist versus generalist, back then, if you remember, we went on the Chad Vaughan and Dave Durante thing, and we had Kirksman and we had Cheryl. Do you think that the current CrossFit world misses some of that? Because I think they see someone who's good at running as a endurance specialist, or someone who can snatch 100 kilos as an Olympic lifting specialist. Yeah. When actually we've actually got some really different experiences and backgrounds from people who are real specialists. I mean, Chad Vaughan went to the Olympics, right? And listening to him and seeing him and talking to him and actually being able to take on those firsthand and then digesting that and then applying it to people, I actually think it's something that's really missing in the current CrossFit and functional fitness world. Yeah,
it's true. Actually, we've had so many amazing mentors. And then when I think back to some of the experiences I've had learning from really smart people, like I've got an amazing list of incredible people that I've learned from. But I genuinely think regardless of what the sport you work in is or what the demographic of people you work with is, I think being a generalist is so, so important. And I love the idea of, you can build a facility and you can have your specialists, you've got your physios, your chiropractors, your psychologists, and then you've got your personal trainers. But I really think I've always gone after being a generalist, and I want to have that skill set. It doesn't mean you can fix everything. It doesn't mean you can provide all the answers, but it means you can impact lives so much greater and probably save people going to the other people when they don't really need to. So I genuinely think like being a generalist as a coach in any discipline, in any field, is so powerful. And I think it really is a massive competitive advantage. What do you think?
I think the way people take on information is different, and I think that sometimes you need other people to say the same thing but in a different way. And I think now we can provide the environment, whereas here actually you've got lots of different facilities have different experiences, and that can actually help. And some people some people feel more comfortable with a female trainer or a male trainer, and I think it's okay to kind of say not that's not for me, but being able to actually be broad enough to reach out and actually speak to those people. I mean, I'm trying to think of who's Brian McKenzie's now a breath person, but before he was pure CrossFit, and Carl Paoli and Diane Fu. I think they'll find their way in the world, but I think it was really interesting that we were right in that mix at the start, and we were able to almost grab all those things and become the generalist that we are. But I think it's quite hard for people who are starting out with CrossFit now that haven't seen just look at the Bergner warm-up, right? And how much, and the CrossFit used to release all of these, articles, and we actually used to talk about them and share them. And now CrossFit is its own CrossFit. There's so much out there that it's hard to actually digest of where did snatch balance come from? Like lots of people think a snatch balance might be a CrossFit movement. I'm like, are you joking? Like the Smolov program and 531 and Wendler and the powerlifting side of stuff that's influenced CrossFit, and why we see yokes. And everyone's like, why are we doing yoke stuff? You're like, that was a big part of that stuff before. So I think I hope you do it, or maybe I'll help you do it one day, like a CrossFit almost history, because I think it's powerful for people to understand, just like I was doing Hong Kong Rugby, to understand why it is what it is, and why is it Fran? Why did that start? And some people do hero workouts, and I'm like, do you know what hero workout is? It's a fallen soul, and this Murph thing, people don't understand where that kind of stuff has come from. And I think it is important for people to get that, because otherwise it's kind of not being part of the process, right? You got to actually understand what that process has come from and where we are now.
Yeah, I think going back to the coach and the generalist conversation, I think CrossFit level 1 is actually a really good set. I think people bash it a lot. But I don't think it should be a foundation for coaching. I think what the level 1 does really well, it teaches cueing, correcting. It teaches correct execution of the fundamental movements of the sport. And do you think those, or the methodology, I should say.
Yeah.
I do think those are really good. I learned a lot about how to actually run a class and coach and change people, correct people. But I do still think that some form of background in periodization, classical strength and conditioning is such a powerful place to start. Because if you can understand the basics of periodization and programming, you can take any discipline and create some form of strategically laid out plan to get someone from A to B. You just got to learn the new discipline. And I think having that background, which is where we started, which is, where rugby was, I'm so thankful for rugby. I'm so thankful that, my coach, Nathan Stewart, who mentored both of us, was a Poliquin guy who pushed me to do Poliquin. And when you have that as your foundation, you move into a new sport. It's just, you just got to now learn the nuances of the new sport and apply it to the model and the systems that you already know. And I do think that all coaches should really start there, regardless of your discipline. And then, you can just add on the sexy, fancy stuff, and whatever discipline you want, it will make sense. It will be less confusing.
Well, that's part of the history. Everyone talks about Ben Patrick, knees over toes, and he does talk about Poliquin, but then people don't even know who Poliquin is.
No.
And I'm like, go do your history, and why is it a front foot elevated split squat? I learned so much from going out there, and weirdly, this was right when I was CrossFitting, and we actually, this is the story, we had to do the deadlift box jump workout, and I went from 5 days of Poliquin, then traveled to do the CrossFit level 1 weightlifting. I had to do it after 2 days of weightlifting and then get on a flight. So it was ascending deadlift
the
weight
open workout, 2015,
and that was to put in scores for us. And I remember you messaging me being like, mate, we've all done it. This is the minimum that you're going to have to do to give us a good score. And I'm here, never using a weightlifting belt in my life, just strapping up and listening to country music in the middle of Branson, Missouri, trying to pull out these.
He basically said, just don't lose to Brats, which you didn't, thankfully.
Well, didn't he get rhabdo from doing it?
On the second bar, yeah. Yeah, crazy times.
Okay, I want to talk about briefly, how long have we gone? Oh man, okay. Is that the right time?
Keep on going, mate.
Okay, regionals, which I actually avoid talking about when people bring it up, because I don't feel like I earned my spot there. So I think it's my Asian Games for you. But what are your thoughts, feelings? Let's go 2014 first. So I'll lay it out. We qualified quite surprisingly for a team in 2014. You actually qualified as an individual and went on a team, which I was very thankful for. Because
me too.
Well, because I think there was one workout which was 21, 18, 15, 12, 9, 6, 3. Strict handstand push-ups.
Front squats.
Front squats at 185 or like 155 maybe.
I was going to say 205.
93 maybe.
Yeah.
Anyway,
really
heavy. The bar facing burpees.
Yeah.
Watching even Ant, who was actually, he wasn't amazing at those movements, but his muscle endurance was high at the time, especially bar facing burpee, which killed people, just die. And that was one of the 6. Anyway,
that was the first year strict handstand push-ups had ever been programmed at regional.
Correct. And this is what CrossFit, I think, history is important, because people don't realize that. Like, people don't realize what CrossFit was, and I think CrossFit as a methodology was better then than it potentially is now for the general pop, because thinking like, oh, everyone should be able to do these strict things and be doing muscle like that. Those are rare. Strict muscle ups were new the year after or 2 years after.
Yeah.
Anyway, we qualified on team. We were out in Seoul. We also thought that the Asia Regionals was going to stay forever, because that's what we were told, because it had been like that for maybe 3, 4, or 5 years. And we're in Korea. What do you remember? What are your highlights? What are your downsides?
I mean, like, that was like back in the regional days, and I think anyone who competed in regionals, especially in a team back then, knows how stressful, if you've got multiple people vying for a spot in your team, how political and nasty that process can be. And I remember it was like, there was tension like between our team. Like, I really wanted to go, and I was like, well, I kind of qualified as an individual, but then the workouts came out and I was like, I'm probably not actually the best person for this team. And that was really a really hard pill to swallow. It like strict handstand push-ups, I could do 1, and that was a grind. Everything else was pretty much fine, but it was just, snatch as well.
Yeah, hang snatch.
I think my PR was like 55.
To be fair, you hit your 60 plus, which was rare, and then obviously Bratz missed both of his.
Yes,
and made it so that we didn't get on the podium.
So my two biggest weaknesses. An overhead squats on the final workout.
Yeah, which didn't matter in the end.
Anyway. Yeah. So anyway, the 3 movements I couldn't really do in the sport all came up and programmed for regionals. So I think that was one, like just those times that we were so new to the sport. And I think, given the fact that I qualified as an individual says a lot. Like, I'd literally been doing CrossFit for less than a year. I just had an engine and knew how to suffer, and had picked up the basic skills of gymnastics decently fast, and just found a way to like make movements work. But obviously going. I mean, lots of really good memories leading up to it. I think for me it was just, I think the reason we did well, because we actually ended up finishing fourth,
and like we were in third into the last workout.
We were on the podium going into that last workout, and as a team collectively we probably like Bratz had done CrossFit for 2 years, the rest of us had started basically for a year.
And we were small, really small,
but our
women were small,
but the thing we had was we were all athletes in previous sports, and that was such an advantage. So like, I just treated it like another rugby competition. Like, we would have team talks, we would like get each other fired up.
Warm-ups.
Training was super fun. Like, we went into the competition with an athlete mentality, even though back then no one was talking about warm-ups, hydration, nutrition. We were still massively under-eating. But, it was just like, the competition environment was really natural for all of us. Like, the high energy, the nerves was like, that didn't bother me. Like, that was totally normal. And so I honestly think that was something that allowed us to excel on that high stage. I couldn't believe that we were in a podium spot.
Mate, we haven't rope climbs, and there was rope climbs.
We just did it all legless.
We did them legless.
Yeah. Like, we didn't have a rope in our gym.
Correct. But we didn't even have a height enough to do wall balls. We had to go somewhere else to do our wall ball shots.
Yeah. And Bratz on day one basically got performance anxiety and got obscenely sick. So almost just sacked it off. Remember, we were like
muscle ups,
we literally had to go into the warm up area.
I forgot about
and
that.
Bratz was still in the hotel, like, nah guys, I'm sick. Did you get Brunges to compete? One of our other mates who was kind of the alternate for the team. And they were like, you can't just change your team member. You've registered your team already. And Bratz was basically like, nah guys, I'm not. When I was like on the phone, like, get to this arena now. We're not coming all the way to Korea not competing. Anyway, Brat's like, he looked like shit, to be fair.
He did.
It was 100% nerves.
And then he made me go first on the strict handstand push-up. I now remember it.
Then I had to go first on the muscle-ups.
Yes, correct.
He was supposed to do
we
the big
rearranged
set.
everything.
Yeah,
because he was like light, and he was like, I can do all the muscle-ups and all the strict handstand push-ups.
Yeah.
These are my 2 workouts. And then he ended up literally just before being like,
Sandbagging
Jamie, go out.
Yeah,
like,
Ed, you do the muscle-ups. But like, genuinely an amazing experience.
Yeah.
Like, I just loved being out there, and like finding my new sport is really what it felt like to me. It was like a year ago I stopped playing rugby, and the next season I'm at the highest level in Asia, competing with people watching us, and it's like wasn't actually televised, it should have been. But I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I genuinely thinking at the time, like, this is my thing now. And I remember I was sitting on CrossFit.com or the CrossFit Games leaderboard page, and I'll be looking at Ben Smith's stats being like, I'm not that far off him, to be fair. I'm like 20 kg off Froning's back squat. I reckon a couple of years of good training, like, I'll be at the CrossFit Games. Obviously, like, my back squat never evolved, and Froning put on 500 kilograms onto it. But like, that was genuinely what I was thinking. I was like, I'm actually competitive here.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are my memories. I have so many good memories those times, though.
I have much better memories 2014 than 2015.
So I'd like to hear, you say you've kind of buried those memories.
2014, I felt like I didn't belong because I was late to the party, and you guys had been doing it more. And actually, we didn't really understand what team training was going to be like. And I was not a good individual athlete in expression of individual athlete at the time. But I was actually, which we didn't know, I was a very good team athlete because I could actually execute well on
You're
lots of
well-rounded,
things.
yeah.
Correct, yeah. So, and it was never limited with engine.
Yeah.
Everyone in the team, like even in the broader team, had a much better engine than I did. And I was had a bit more body fat, which you guys never let me go. And still don't, to be fair, which didn't help with longer endurance pieces. But let's be honest, like, when is a team event ever longer
Especially
than 10
back then.
minutes,
Back
right?
then it was never.
Even then. So when we would ever work as a team, I was always flagging behind. We were also maybe training a little high volume in terms of... There we go. Well, at least he said it. And I would not hide, but in team training, I was nervous because I knew I'd have to prove myself. And luckily, I got on the team. And it was because I think, that, like you said, the stress that you had, it almost helped me because it was like, do you know what? What's better for us as a whole and us as a sport? And also, you sat down. I remember telling me to being like, I'm not sure that you not deserve, but like has shown enough. But I think you're going to get much better. You are getting much better. And it was almost like a long-term thing, which I really appreciated, but it was fast at the time. And we had a lot of drama. So 2014 was like a blur. Like when I talk about living in the moment, I really wish I just like experienced it because I performed really well. It wasn't until actually you gave me a professional review as we came back. And then you were like, you were the best person on the team. Like you did well in here and you did well in there, but I didn't even feel it because I just didn't feel like I belonged, really.
Interesting. But do you think you were present in the moment? Because to put an amazing performance in and to say you didn't feel like you were there.
It's weird, isn't it? No, I don't. Like, I don't. I was like, I remember because Hightower was like competing in 852 and remember we beat them in that rope climb workout. That's the thing that I remember the most because Bratz, once again, he was like, I'll do the rope climbs. And then he tagged me out and I had the last rope climb to do. And I genuinely... it like felt like that last ditch tackle in rugby. I knew I wasn't going to make it and I literally just let go and launched and just hit and just dropped. And I remember hitting the pad and just springing out of my knees and being caught into, there's a photo of it of like Babs and Emily, I believe. And I genuinely was like, I think my knee's broken, but I was always going to do it.
They said,
my body on the line.
I think they actually credited 0 to 60 with the win.
Correct.
We had beaten them.
Yeah,
so I remember
taking
the video to Boz in the judges room and he was like, don't ever do that shit again. And I'm like, sorry, there's no process has been explained. Can you please tell me what I should do if like we have video evidence of
us winning,
beating this team by, and then the whole other team saying that we'd beaten them.
Yeah, I do remember them saying they actually admitted because Doug was really like, like they absolutely beat us. Like we were neck and neck and that we went for legs and they went for legless.
Yeah, exactly.
So I remember that moment, and then I remember Bratz bombing out the workout. Actually, I spoke to Bratz about it a couple of days ago, and I should have taken that. That's the thing. I hid there as well. I knew Bratz was actually a bit tired, and I said this is the first time I've actually spoken about it, and it's like, whatever, 8 years later, I was like, I should have told you that I should have gone first, because even though we did it twice in training and he technically beat me by like 10 or 15 seconds.
Is the handstand push-up workout?
No, the pull-up overhead squat right at the end.
Yeah.
Right. So it was 49 pull-ups, I believe, and then 7 overhead squats at
185.
Yeah, 185. And I'd done it in training and I'd messed up a couple of times, but we were tight. And for me, it was the pull-ups, and for Bratz, it was the overhead squats. And I look back at it and I should have just been like, nah, in the warm-up, he was doing the same thing. I don't know. And I just was like, if he bombs, it's cool. Like, it won't be on me. And I look back at that moment and I'm like, you should have just trusted it. Nowadays, I would just be like, yeah, like, give it to me, because I'd rather fail and it be on me than for me to regret not doing. That's probably a general theme. I'd rather regret doing than regret not doing.
Yeah.
But then, I look at that moment and I'm like, oh, shoulda, woulda, coulda. But then there was very much like we'll do it next year. And then next year was not the same.
You mentioned that you didn't have a good experience in 2015.
No, I didn't. I think because
15 we went to, basically that's when it got merged into the not super regionals, but the Pacific regionals. So we were competing in Australia.
Yeah.
With Australia and New Zealand. Yeah.
I think then there was much more pressure. I think. What do you remember?
You go first.
Well, no, there was much more friction between you and I, because I think that going into it, at that point we'd all got our own coaches. We did tests, and like the teams were a much more thing, and we'd also had a big experience with the region before. And I think I can't remember exactly, but I think I was having friction with Bratz because I thought he was going to underperform, and I thought we should, and there was loads of like things in my head that I just externally pushed everything out, because I was going to be like, I'm going to do fucking well in this, right? And and actually the events were not made for me, but all the things that I could not hide, but like you guys were good at, you were going to do. There was one workout I didn't do anything. If you remember, it was the GHD sit up and then muscle up workout. Yeah. And I literally sat on the start line, stretched, didn't even get on, because it was such a difficult workout and you guys were way better at those things than I was. And yet handstand walk, if you remember, do you remember the start of the handstand walk?
Yeah, I do remember. we literally laugh at us all the time. What did you say to the judge?
I'm embarrassed.
Is there a speed limit on these handstand walks?
No. I just said I'm going to run, so you better catch me.
Are you sure you didn't say, is there a speed limit? I'm pretty sure you said a speed limit.
You are making shit up.
And this judge looked at us behind you and was like, oh, all right. And then to be fair, you started and he went, oh shit, he is pretty fast.
I absolutely gunned it.
Yeah, he was like
but yeah, and it's one of those things. I have actually watched it back because it's on YouTube, and I fall right at the last minute.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah. So interestingly, I don't remember any friction between us. I remember the friction, I think, with me being more of a mediator between you and Bratzy.
Yeah.
I think
I forgot about that. And even in team training sessions, there was that too.
I think it was more that I could see that you were fired up. I could see that you felt like there was something to prove after, you performing really well the year before. And I could see, obviously, we had given Bratz shit all year about bombing that regionals. And to be fair to Bratzy, he says it himself, he's always struggled at high level competitions. And so, stopping football, essentially being competitive and then suddenly being thrown back into a massive arena with no learning or transition or mentorship, it's not really surprising that it was always and he never did competitions.
No, he didn't do any individuals, any individuals, and we had to pretty much convince him, to be fair, because he was a specialist, which helped then as in the team in terms of body weight stuff.
So I genuinely didn't feel, I think I felt more tension the year before, because it was we were kind of vying for places. We didn't have that in the second year. I think I'd worked a lot on my holes and was fine.
Oh yeah, we were fine as a team, and we went with the exact same team, which made me feel, but then for me that was more pressure, because I was like, well, now we gotta perform here, and I wanted to just try and beat one of the Aussie teams,
which I don't think we did.
No, I don't think we did in the end.
No, we were top team in Asia.
Oh yeah, easily. But then also, if you remember, the thing that I remember, which Bratz brought up again, so clearly at least he remembers, is that he changed my weights wrong, and I went mental at him at the snatch.
You went for 90, did you?
No, it wasn't. It was just the fact that we'd practiced, and I was very much control the controllables. And if you remember, we were at Darlinghurst or whatever, and we put out all the plates, and we talked through it. But then they added a 15-pound plate. That's black one. And so he messed my lift up. And I think it's pretty much the only no rep that I've ever got, because I was so annoyed that he gave my starting lift
you
too
missed
light.
The snatch
I
in
missed
Asia.
it. Which one?
You missed your 185, your last snatch. Went behind you, remember?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a dream.
That was a Hail Mary.
Yeah. Whereas this was an opening lift. Remember we went safe lift, and then you could change your own weight.
Yeah,
you had 45 second window.
Yeah.
You can have as many attempts as you want, but 45 seconds. Right. So it was 2 lifts. And then he made my opening weight incorrect. When Sophie also missed the lift as well.
That's right.
So I just blamed a lot on the outside.
Yeah.
And then that kind of started my weekend.
Yeah. Interesting. I didn't actually remember you having like a bad weekend that weekend.
Just a lot of internalized. I can really do that well.
Yeah. When did you really sit down to reflect on that immediately? Or was this something it's taken years to?
I think years, but more that so I left, I felt terrible. So right after we did that, we did Asia Champs, which I don't think we have to go into because we kind of covered it a bit and had the best time. Didn't perform well, but it was really nice to do that. We had a holiday, I had a holiday in New Zealand for a few days and then we did it. But I already knew, that was the other thing I forgot, is that I already knew I was leaving Hong Kong. Adam had already essentially figured out and accepted his job over. And I talked about this with Adam. He was ready to go and we needed to do it for like family reasons or whatever, but I wasn't ready to leave Hong Kong. So that's why there was lots of pressure on that 15s and even Asia Champs, because I was like, this is it. But you didn't know that. No one knew that. And I actually had to wait really long because after Asia Champs, you took a holiday. And you actually, do you remember when I told you I was leaving?
You told me in the gym, did you not?
No, so you asked for a meeting because we normally have the review after the end of the year, and then actually you were like, I knew because someone else had told me to be like, oh, Ed's got some exciting like work stuff to tell you, and then I was like, fuck, I'm gonna have to tell him I'm leaving, and actually you sat down and you were like, like you and Anne, like we're gonna make big waves. I want to do this and that, and I had to literally be like, I'm gonna stop you there. Like I've got some bad news. Like I'm not staying in Asia, so I think that. Really made it difficult for me to not let it go, but process it, because then it was also a blur. I had to like say goodbye to everyone. I had to kind of give up that role where I was, and then I got shunted into being in London, which the CrossFit community is just very different to here, and obviously the competitive side is just very different. And then CrossFit changed a lot more in terms of like teams and open and qualifying, and it got really, really blurry for me.
So what was that experience like for you? I don't think we've ever really sat down and talked about the leaving of Coastal, and I guess that had been like everything you knew from a coaching standpoint outside of rugby to then like going to London. What were some of the biggest changes? Yeah,
really difficult if I'm being honest. I think what I didn't realize, which I always talk about, is the sharing. Here you are big sharers of everything. Like everyone is willing to share clients. If you go on holiday, other people will train your clients. That's not normal. It's not a normal thing to allow that vulnerability of like, well, what if they think they're better and want to have them? It's like, well, then they're a better fit. That is really rare. And I was used to that. And I probably had my heart too open and vulnerable relative to what everyone was going to do. So that was a fast realization. The other thing is that you're the only person that I've worked with, including the Hong Kong Rugby Union, including multiple people, is that will support learning with their like pocket. Because there's a very different thing to be like, yeah, you can go on as many courses as you want, but by the way, you're taking personal holiday and paying it for yourself. Then you're like, okay, so this is just about me. And then when you come back, I want you to feed back to the group what you've learned. And I'm like, so I've got to pay for it all, take time off, and then you want something back in return. That's where it was so different here. And I didn't, I guess, appreciate that until I did. I actually did. I remember saying that to you a lot. But I guess I missed it a lot when it was gone. And then just Saturdays, man, like Saturdays in normal CrossFit gyms, I think around the world, is mostly one coach doing it all. And if you want to train after, you train alone. I remember speaking to Max, because I still had Max as a coach then. And he was like, man, you just sound like being at the gym on Saturday sucks. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you just write in like you're already bored in your session and the muscle up sets are too long because you like want to go home. And I was like, yeah, I've just coached for like 4 hours and then I'm by myself training till 2.
Probably really high energy 4 hours. Saturdays are mayhem pretty much.
Correct. And you're just solo because other people want to get out and do stuff. But you got to commit to, being in that environment, in that gym, if you're going to have that, in my opinion. But yeah, so I gave up Saturday training, which was actually really helpful. So I became like a 5-day warrior. And then, I guess I fell out of love of CrossFit because I didn't get all the things that I was used to getting. And that was probably a bit of like an extreme on one side to like a really low on the other side.
What were some of those things?
Just just people actually talk. It's like today, like we trained and we like did some muscle up stuff, and being able to actually be open to talking about other people's opinions and stuff. People are like, why are you filming? Like, why do you care? You've already got whatever 15 unbroken muscle ups. So I'm like, it's not about 15 unbroken or 16. It's about, I just care about this. I care about this learning. I care about this process. I care about the detail. And I felt like people just did like grunt volume and hard work. It went back to kind of the old school CrossFit mentality. And I was like, but you could get better by just thinking. Like, why are we trying to do massive amounts of work? And then I try to implement a lot of things that I learned here and over there. And I actually I'd put too much energy into it. I had like open shared Google Docs for people to put in. I was working out percentages of stuff and single leg work, all the stuff that, is really important, but I had no buy-in from other people. So it felt like I was just flogging, and I was making videos to explain to the coaches, because they have like 15 part-time coaches, and I was sending them working in the banking world, and I'm like sending them videos to watch 5 minutes before they arrive to their class. And it was just, I learned a lot. And I grew fast again.
What do you think contributed to all the things that you had intended to do to be good things, like not working? What was it about the gym? Was it the gym structure, the way that businesses were?
No, I think it's easy. Those things are definitely true. But I think, as you know, about me in general, like, I might have all the ideas, I might have all the answers, but how you communicate them and how you get them to where they are is its own skill, right? And it's here, as much as you can maybe clash, it's kind of like, even though we might clash professionally, we won't clash personally, where I think most people find that really hard in a gym environment to distinguish. So I think I try to just do too much too quickly, and then didn't respect also the history of where that gym had come from. Like, that gym, and my old boss at the time, he helped run like the first regionals in London, right? And he's like, look at this rower. This was, rowed by Annie Thorisdottir and in 2011, right? And I just forget that he's even deeper in, but it also means that he's got his own baggage and trauma that we've just kind of talked about in their own style. And I came in being like, yeah, but I'm better.
Yeah.
And whether it's true or not doesn't matter. But like, if I actually want to make change, you can't just get a sledgehammer out and start chunking chops out.
There's a degree of empathy that's probably needed for the people you're trying to induce change in.
Yeah, and I was relatively young at the time too, but I had obviously had great experiences and was able to both professionally and personally do a lot over here, because it is such a melting pot and there's so many opportunities and they're fast. So I kind of had some gravitas, but over there I had nothing. They were like, I don't care about your regionals, I don't care about the Asia Championships, I don't care about Coastal Fitness. Who are these people?
It's funny, like when you look at the history, we came in, like Hong Kong was late on the CrossFit bandwagon, but I feel like just with our history and background in sport and strength and conditioning, we just kind of like, we evolved really fast in terms of like our thoughts on methodology, our thoughts on training. We weren't afraid to try new things, weren't afraid to challenge. Like, maybe that was a good thing, the fact that we were the second CrossFit gym in Hong Kong, that there didn't really know what the norm was. So we had tried, so I've talked about this in the podcast, where we tried all these different ways to write group program. Remember we had the blue, red and green training groups? Yeah. We moved away. We were like, you know what, we shouldn't have a live, perform, compete or at a beginner, intermediate, advanced. We should just basically do a whole bunch of testing, and then based on what people's weaknesses are, we'll create groups just for those people. And we said, rather than going, beginner, intermediate, advanced, let's have colors. So then people don't create a hierarchy within those groups. And it was just a shit show. But we literally tried.
I wanted earth, fire, wind and water. Do you remember?
But even like thinking about how we used to program classes, like I would write one track, Bratz would write another track, Ant would write another. And like the classes were a shit show. One program would literally take 75, one would take 45. Like it was just like trying to manage those classes was mayhem. It was just like literally controlled chaos.
But I think by doing that, that's what I mean, the openness and the sharing to be like, actually that didn't work. We got to change now. I remember Bratz at one point was just like, we're just going to do 40 minutes of just movement, like pistol here, and then someone's going to Schwinn air dying, and we're going to do lunges here. And it's like, it doesn't even matter what they're doing because we're just general movement. It's just a general movement day. And I was like, that's fine, and you're running the class, but I actually have no idea. Like I've never coached whatever you're trying to put out there. But the concept's great. So like trying to put that into, I remember I was right there when it was like rest day in the midweek and how we're going to do that and how we're going to, but that's powerful to be able to say like, actually, this is actually where you should take your foot off the gas and then put your foot down is already there. I think most CrossFit gyms, which is probably it'd be great to have this as a separate thing, is like either really structured in terms of movements or muscle groups, and then other ones are done it in terms of, I can't remember what they call it, but like peaks and troughs, like high-low training, where they're like, this is an intense day and this is a skill day. But you can do it all. But it's really complicated, and you got to sit down to be like, yeah, this can be a movement-based program, but it's also an intensity. It's also fun. It's also community. It's also, and you've got to layer it in multiple ways. But the most important part, which is what I learned working in different gyms, is that your coaches have got to understand it. You are one person, right? And it wasn't until we, had team meetings regularly and we actually sat down and actually got through stuff where you can actually sing off the same hymn sheet, because a program's only good if people actually want to do it. Like, you can be the best program written ever, but without that kind of buy-in, without that kind of explanation, without that kind of education, it's not going to be effective.
Yeah, I just think the education and learning part has just always been so embedded in coastal fitness. It was when it was just me. Yeah. And I've always just been fascinated, because I was, as a rugby player, I talk about a story all the time, spending so much time in the gym, rehabilitating myself from injury. I became just so fascinated with strength and conditioning. I would just ask Nathan, our strength and conditioning coach, just pepper him with questions and tell me, explain to me, how does this work? How does this work? What's the progression? Why did you choose this rep scheme? Why did you put this tempo in? And it was that's just always been ingrained. I think, when I look at these values on the wall, the growth mindset part has been a part of every coastal fitness coach who has, stayed for a substantial amount of time has had a growth mindset, which, they're welcome to be challenged. They're constantly seeking growth in every area, but especially in the professional area. And it's never stopped. I would say the insatiable appetite for learning has only increased since those days. And it's professional development. We have a team session still once a week, and we're having multiple breakouts, between different coaches all the time happening. And I love it. I learn every time. I often just sit in on our level 1 coaches, our newer coaches who are getting mentored, and just will listen to other coaches talking, because just listening gives me so much more language, which allows me to then be more versatile and effective as a coach.
So that's sharing, right? How do you feel? And I've never asked you this question. With coaches, I think the reason why people are reluctant to open up and share like that is because they're worried that people might leave. And obviously you've had multiple coaches come and go and stay for a long period of time. And for a while it was really steady, right? And now then there's a little phase that was a bit more in and out. How do you feel when people, come and be part of the organization? Actually, it's going to happen. This is a weird thing. At the start, it might not happen for a long time because you're a small company and everyone's really tight knit, but you can't stop it, right? I wanted to stay for sure, but to actually hear it, to be no, but I'm going. How do you cope with that process?
There's different, you'll have uncontrollable departures, which is someone like yourself, who, if it was a family thing and you're relocating overseas, can't do anything about that. That's going to be a part of, running a business forever. You've got controllable things as well, though. I think some of the controllable things, and I look back to most of the staff that have come and gone over the years, actually I take responsibility in hiring them in the first place. And, back then we didn't have things like values. We had these unspoken principles, which, you were a part of coastal fitness and a culture where it was just known. You felt it, you walked in and you picked up that vibe. And you just kind of knew how things were going to be done, but it was an unspoken. But as the team grew and the business grew, the unspoken becomes a bit blurred. Yeah. And you have new personalities come in from different backgrounds, extroverts, introverts, and suddenly that culture that had been so ingrained in our first 6-7 years of business, literally disappeared. And I found it really, really hard to try and bring people back to this is how it should be done. And how it should be done hadn't been written anywhere. So I couldn't really say you're not doing your job, I need you to be better here, because actually you are doing your job, which is to coach people. What are the behaviors that I expect from a coastal fitness employee? And that's really fast forward 10 years, that's where I came to the point of creating values. And, now looking at the last couple of years of hiring, still make mistakes, to find out, to really get into the weeds of what makes a person isn't something you can do in an interview. Yeah. It's not something you can do in 10 interviews, genuinely. Yeah. You need life experiences. You need to go through some shitty times. You need to go through some really good times. You need to hang out with them outside the gym, hang out with them in the gym. You need to see them go through some trauma to really get a feel for what makes a person. And that's why the hiring process is going to be forever the hardest part of running an organization. And I think, the way that I do it now is so much more advanced than it ever has been. But still, like, people fall through the gaps. You know, in the last year, I've still made a couple of hires that weren't the right hires, and unfortunately, these people didn't stay with us for very long. But I would say, you know, when I look at the majority of the last few hires, like, we now have people. I take someone like a Liam, for example. Liam wrote to Coastal Fitness saying, "I've seen your values and I resonate with your values. I've seen your mission and I resonate with your mission. Can I be a part of your organization?" And that's just like the evolution of culture. And they say that, you know, business culture takes 6 years to form. I don't know where that arbitrary number comes from, but I still like the idea of like, okay, well, if it's 6 years to form, we're 3 years in.
Yeah.
And so I'm still seeing, you know, like our newer coaches, we have 2 apprentices and a new coach who are fairly junior, all joined the team in the last year or so. And I'm seeing that these guys still don't quite get it. Like, they've had to have sit downs, reminders. And I'm like, okay, we're not quite there yet. But I always think about like a Liverpool or like an Arsenal or Man United. You walk into those changing rooms and you just know what the Liverpool way is. I've never been to Anfield, so I don't know what it is, but I hear people talking about it, like the Liverpool culture. Yeah. And that's what I want to create now. I want that culture. And I can foresee in 5 years' time, like, you're just going to know what the Coastal way is. We'll still have to have things written on the wall, and we'll still have to have coaching handbooks and reminders as to what that way is.
What you're talking about before, you're actually, you know, people are reaching out to you from overseas, people that you've never heard on. Loads of people in my circles, you know, speak about you, but when they speak about you, they hear this kind of conversation on the outside, but I'm like, it's different on the inside. Of course it is. And that's why culture is such a deep thing, because it isn't just one podcast or a podcast series, right? And it isn't just the video. It is walking through the door and feeling the whole thing.
Yeah. And I think that's something that I really definitely took from like team sport days. Like the idea of like the collective, the idea of like sharing, the idea of we're in it together, you know, and I've never had the issues with like the sharing stuff that you talked about, like, you know.
Yeah, well, a pregnant client was always my example. Who's your client that's been pregnant a lot?
Geraldine.
Correct. And people are like, well, how? Because I trained my first 2 pregnant clients, right? And I remember messaging about it actually. And they're like, how can you be so confident to do it? And I was like, well, I kind of did it. They're like, what do you mean? Well, my boss and a couple other people at the time, like, we went through it and we spoke about, you know, why and the do's and the don'ts and thoughts and practical applications and what they might be feeling and da-da-da. So I feel confident because I shared that journey. Like, why would you not, was the thing that I found weird, to be like, look, you can just sit there. We don't all have to train that one client. If we come in and just spend 3 minutes speaking about what happened, then you can just be like, great, now we've all got that information, you go try it.
Yeah. And I think like people are far too afraid of failure. I know like, you know, pre-postnatal is kind of scary because like there's 2 human beings you're technically training here and there's a lot on the line, but, you know, like smart principles and protocols and undercooking it versus overcooking it, like, it's very hard to do anything really bad. And like, we can't be afraid of failing. Like, this programming and coaching, there are millions of ways to skin the cat. We know that all the time. And there's no right or wrong with anything.
Yeah, well, I learned a bit too much, I guess, from like physios and like a massage course I did way back when. I think this term "do no harm" is actually quite poisonous, because everyone's like, just, you know, as long as you don't make it worse, that's good enough. And I'm like, sometimes, not with a pregnant person, but if someone's got an injury, I'm like, if I make it worse, at least I know what not to do pretty quickly. Yeah. I don't want to do it, and I'm never going to do it deliberately. But if it happens, I literally say to that person, I got it wrong, but great. Because what we did there was the reverse. Like, let's go in the opposite direction. But if we just kind of nudge really slowly, how are you going to know anything? Because they probably are getting better just because a day's gone past or a week's gone past. But it's only when you actually put some skin in the game, take a few risks to actually be able to learn from that, which is obviously a whole separate
I agree.
topic. Okay, it's been a while. So I actually had some like finishers, which are like quick fire questions.
Oh, nice.
I kind of stole a few of these from some friends. It starts fitness and then it gets a bit, so we'll just go. I can already see your brain overthinking.
No, not at all. I'm ready for this.
Okay. Squats or deadlifts? Overthink right there.
Whoa, hang on a minute. Are we talking about me? Are we talking about general pop?
You.
I'll take a deadlift any day.
Great. Snatch or clean and jerk?
Snatch.
Pull-ups or dips?
Pull up.
Long workouts or short workouts?
Long, obviously.
Ski or row?
Row.
Oh, interesting. Even with your knee?
Yeah. Doesn't seem to hurt my knee. Can't get because it's also not loaded.
Correct.
Because I'm horizontal. It doesn't get forced into a position. It just gets to the point where bone hits bone and I just press.
Do you not get that like hamstring back in the knee after you do loads of rowing?
No.
Obviously, we have.
You mean in the extension? Because of the extension?
No,
Or
it's
'cause of
actually
the compression.
compression.
No, don't get it. I don't think my knee can bend far enough
to actually get
to
anything.
get
in there.
anything. Yeah.
Interesting. Assault bike or echo bike?
Assault bike. Still haven't learned enough about the echo bike yet. I've done a lot of experimentation on it, but still.
What are your big things of how they're different? Slowing down obviously is a big part of the fan wheel.
Yeah. I definitely feel like the assault bike gives the impression that you're working harder.
Because of the sound?
The sound, the revolutions, I think, are faster. And I also think because the echo bike, the fan blows so much air in your face, you're always cool. That's so ridiculous. But like, I find it very hard to sweat on an echo bike.
And you love to sweat.
Yeah, and I just think I haven't spent enough time on an echo to like get geeky about the data. But I definitely know like cruising pace on an echo feels way more comfortable than cruising pace on an assault bike. But it's when you start to increase and jack up the RPMs on an echo, that's where you start to really feel the pain. So it's like when you push an echo, it hurts a lot, but at cruise pace, it feels a lot easier in assault bike.
It's not on here, but how do you feel about a bike erg? Just general.
I like bike ergs.
I think you get a really good aerobic response.
I think you get a great aerobic response. It's kind on the body. Like there is very little prep that's needed to be able to hop on a bike and start pedaling away. You can still train. You can kind of touch in the anaerobic energy system somewhat. Yeah, I think it's good.
Run or swim?
Run.
Okay, a bit broader. FaceTime or voice note?
I do both a lot. That's a hard one, actually. This is no longer quick fire either. I'm gonna say FaceTime over a voice call.
Okay,
for sure.
And voice note over a message. Yeah, but that's not my question. But it's fine.
There you
it's
go.
Good
Both.
enough. Okay, fine. This is speak every language in the world or talk to animals.
Talk to animals.
Correct answer.
Oh, I didn't realize I was getting assessed here.
You are.
Yeah.
From me.
Yeah.
I've already obviously thought about this a million times.
How am I doing so far?
I've got 90% of the questions right.
Nice.
For what you were gonna say. Invisibility or super strength?
I already got super strength, so I'll take invisibility. No. I would take invisibility.
Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset.
Oh, interesting. Why? I got that wrong.
I do like value a sunset massively because it's like the conclusion of a day and my day ends quite quickly after the sun sets. So I kind of like that as like, it's the cue that it's time to finish your day now. Yeah. And I enjoy the glow of the sunset.
Yep.
Don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are you a morning hiker? No.
No, I like my future that I envision for myself would be wake up pretty much as the sun's rising and walk.
Yeah.
Like just 20 to 30 minutes, ideally like by the water on a beach or on a cliff or something. But I would love to start my day with just like outdoors, nature, fresh air and the sun.
Feet on the ground.
Yeah, feet on the ground. Like
coffee after?
Coffee after. I love the idea of coffee during,
yeah.
But I'm a coffee after breakfast guy.
Correct.
I genuinely, that's my dream. Like it's going to happen at some point I'm going to start my day like that. What about you? You sunset? That's not about you, is it? Fuck, sorry. Continue.
You're still trying to be the interviewer. I like it. I actually don't know. I haven't thought about it.
Do you watch either? Do you prioritize either in your day?
Yes.
Do you get a good sunset or sunrise view from your house? Do you have to go somewhere for it?
No, I'm lucky. I can get both pretty easily.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I can get both pretty easily.
Yeah, I actually don't get either in my house. Like the sun rises literally a meter too far to my right that is blocked by a building, and the sun sets a meter too far to my left.
Yeah, I mean, you're in Hong Kong. I'd probably say sunset actually, even though I'm like my lifestyle, if people were to guess, it's more sunrisey. And I appreciate that. And especially, I did like not talking about COVID. We did really well. You mentioned it once.
I did mention it once. And I actually, as I said it, I was like, I wish I didn't use that word.
But I was getting up super early before the world in my brain woke up. And my dream would be just to take my dog on a walk way before anything starts. And I really enjoy. I had to do it in COVID almost because I needed it.
You said COVID.
But I probably would. I value that time.
You know what? I actually watched the sunset a few months ago and cried.
Oh, brilliant.
I never thought, when people used to say they cry at a sunset.
You're like, I have no idea.
I was like, that doesn't make sense to me. And I actually, I had a tear trickle down my face.
Music does that to me now.
Yeah.
Music does that to me massively.
Music can definitely do that to me, but I think it was how insignificant I felt in like this huge sun, and like how beautiful it was. It was like a beautiful sunset, and I just like started welling up inside, and just like started crying in my bedroom.
Gosh, I thought you were a robot, but I've learned a lot today.
Yeah, I was very much a robot. Those days are long gone.
Good. Salty or sweet?
Salty.
Travel to the past or travel to the future?
Past.
Blind or deaf?
Deaf.
Interesting.
Mm.
Really?
Yeah.
Sport?
No, not even sport.
Just realised we couldn't have this conversation easily if you were deaf.
That's true. Yeah, it wouldn't make for a very entertaining podcast.
I will try, and I've done this multiple times, but I think being blind growing up would be very, very challenging. But being deaf as an adult would be, I personally, I don't know, actually I do know some hard of hearing people, so I feel okay to say this, but I think it's really hard to have deep relationships with people because you can't have natural flowing. Like it's a bit different if I was deaf now and I've got a lot of my life set up, like I'd feel a bit more of a quote unquote burden. Yeah. Which is difficult.
I could definitely see that. That's a cool way to think about it.
I can talk forever.
But I definitely think like there is so much beauty in music, yes, but there is also so much beauty in sight. Yeah. I don't know, not ever knowing what the world around you looks like.
Well, worse actually, because you would know, but now you couldn't see it.
Yeah.
So in some ways, I think it's worse.
Oh, you mean so like
to happen now?
Oh, to happen now, that's different. Oh, if that's very different. Okay, if it happened now, then I'd choose blind.
Yeah. I thought you would.
But I think growing up, I would actually...
Growing up would be...
Like, not ever being able to witness what the world looks like, I think would be... Yeah.
Yeah, it would be tough. Okay, but last few. Your karaoke song.
Michael Bublé, Everything.
Great choice. Wow, that is left field.
It's literally the only Bublé song that's in my range as well. Every other one either goes too high or too low.
Michael Bublé is one of the few people I've seen more than once in concert.
Yeah, I'd love to see him. Is he still performing? Because I heard he canned it, or I think his son got really sick. Did he not?
I'm not sure. This was years and years ago. I actually saw him in Hong Kong once, and I saw him in America, he's really charming. Like,
yeah, he seemed
really
like a really good dude, and that's kind of why I like him. And he's an unbelievable singer.
Spirit Animal.
I'm trying to think. I literally started laughing because I'm thinking if the rest of my team was in here, just thinking about what they would say my spirit animal would be.
What would they say?
They'd say something really slow and feeble and very broken, and just probably wouldn't contribute a whole lot to the animal kingdom. What's my spirit animal? I genuinely don't know. What do you think my spirit animal is? I've never thought about that question.
No, I think it's quite a loaded one, to be fair, because there's like a big pressure.
I guess like the first thing I think about is like the physical capacity of the animal, but then I think spirit. I think spirit. I'm thinking more about like the lion resembles like ferociousness and you know, that kind of thing. The leopard is like sly and
I think
cunning.
You're a lead by example kind of person. Which I've always thought about when you're a leader of any organization or any team or whatever. There's obviously multiple different ways that you can lead, and some people lead by a bit more aggression, like a lion or whatever, whereas actually you're trying to just lead by example and then other people follow, but also quite cerebral. So I was gonna
to what animals are?
I don't know, like some kind of like a jaguar, I was gonna say, but like
I'll take that.
Anyway, favorite song of all time.
Santeria by Sublime. Probably don't even know it.
No, if I played it maybe, but I actually don't know it.
Let me give you another one.
No, it's fine.
No, because I have a lot of really like.
No, that was it. You can't go back.
Okay,
no choices.
That's my
biggest
song.
fear.
Biggest fear. So a really good question, and I feel like I should have an answer, but I'm struggling. What's my biggest fear? So you've got biggest fear?
Yeah, dying alone.
Dying alone. That's not my biggest fear.
Yeah, it's definitely my biggest fear.
Give me some of the biggest fears.
Being alone is probably more. If I'm thinking about it, being alone.
That doesn't scare me.
Just like not seeing certain things, I think can be there. I think parental things, moving out of Hong Kong or Do you get any fear when that? Oh, let's not get political.
But I think I think those things don't scare me.
It does scare you though. But you can literally be like spiders. But you're not that kind of person. You're too cerebral.
No, I honestly think when I think about fear and like, I have these conversations with a lot of my clients and friends a lot. Like losing your business, losing your loved one. I genuinely feel so self-assured in myself that I know that whatever happens in the external world around me, like I'll come through it.
But what about this doesn't come in my head because I'm just not rational, but like a medical condition where you're physically,
yeah, I mean,
MS
those things,
ALS.
do scare me. I know what I've had happen to my body pales in comparison to like, let's say being, paralyzed or in a wheelchair. I think that does scare me for sure. Like the thought of like completely losing my physical capacity. But again, like I also know I'd be okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I need to dig into that. Thank you for the question. Thanks for the question. I am going to think about it more.
It gets a bit. Well, let's do this one. What makes you angry?
Angry. I'm not sure if angry. What makes me angry? This podcast hasn't frozen everyone. It's me thinking.
This is good. I'm glad I asked these questions.
Yeah, these are really good questions.
There's only one more.
Angry. I think I don't know if it's not just disrespect, but it's like not treating other humans with kindness.
Mm-hmm.
I think that actually makes me angry because it was hard for me to discern between like disappointed, upset, and anger, because anger is an emotion that I don't think too often gets triggered in me.
Yeah.
But like, I guess inequality and unfair treatment and just a lack of respect or kindness shown to other human beings or even like animals, like really like unfair treatment, I think maybe is the word. I think I need to find a better word for that, but I think the treatment of others is something that probably really does make me angry.
Okay. And this is, then we'll see. Do you believe in fate?
Yes. I have lots of thoughts on it. I when I think about fate,
it's obviously a broad term. So
and I guess like the definition, the general definition would be like that something is meant to happen.
Yeah, or everything happens for a reason.
Everything happens for a reason.
That's a softer way of the fate. Not that like you have no choices and this is the only thing that you're ever going to do, whether you knew it or not. Not that intense, but just like, do you believe in a bigger calling? Or
I do believe in a bigger calling. I went down a rabbit hole in this for a little bit because I do think there's the population splits in a way where I think a lot of people think that whatever happens is meant to happen. It happened for a reason. But like we also have an obligation to show up and actually dictate what happens in our life as well.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's like fate is dictated by, think of it like an instrument. And like your destiny is dictated by like how well you play your instrument in that point in time.
Yep.
And so I definitely think like we are controllers of our destiny in a way. And maybe that kind of goes against fate, but I guess it kind of is fate because we so often, what's the word? We begins with an M. What's the word I'm thinking about? Not materialize. Manifest. We can manifest our fear. I really do believe in manifestations, and I've seen it happen many times in my own life, which means that really a manifestation, like I am wishing something to happen and I am doing things in my life to increase the likelihood of that thing happening. But I also, think sitting back and doing nothing and then the way that life unfolds being, well, that's just the way it was supposed to be. I don't know if I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that means I believe in it or not.
Well, if we can leave, not every answer has to have an ending and conclusion. All right.
Great questions, Jimbo.
I'm done.
Thank you. Well, listen, Jamie, I didn't really interview you. So this is the first time I think we've had an episode on the Process Podcast where I guess I've been more interviewed, but thank you so much for coming on. We have to do another one where we dig into your story more. But you really threw some good questions at me there. I'm gonna sit and meditate on a lot of those things because I want to.
Meditating was actually on here. I had a few other things, but we'll save it for another time.
We'll save it for another one.
All right. I appreciate coming on. Cheers.